Hello and welcome back for another podcast episode of Asino Magazine. My name is Emre Şentürk, and today I'm going to talk about how we can deal with the United States of America. So, let's get it on. In the last episode, I talked about how we can deal with China. Obviously, it was a very short take and also focused on some sort the international actions that can be taken against China, or the actors who can actually take action against China and those who don't. In this episode, I want to talk about to level the playing field, also about the United States of America, because there are many countries that have a stake in power reduction of the United States of America. And it is a question that not many people ask if they are kind of positioned in the West, but it is nonetheless a valid question because 80% of the remaining states in the world basically ask themselves this question, which is also warranted if we look at the track record of the United States of America internationally. And this is also born out of a different approach to international politics. Before I get to the details of how to deal with the United States, I want to talk about how international state systems actually can be structured and designed and what the current situation is. So, the most recent international state design or international politics design was basically the Cold War era, where we had two superpowers that stood against each other, had very different ideological preferences and ideas, and also goals that they wanted to further and achieve. And obviously it was the Soviet Union with a very leftist, socialist and communist view of the world, and on the other side the United States of America and all the Western countries that are ideologically close to the ideas of the United States. So what we call such a constellation is a bipolar international order. Bipolar, obviously, because we have two powers that are kind of on the other side of the spectrum. Recently, I also talked about the political cube, where I discussed the differences on the political axis, and this is a very one-dimensional thinking because we have the one on the left and the other one on the right, meaning that we have a very limited view, and in a bipolar global order, obviously you can only move along one axis because they're just two actors that stand against each other. The structural problem with that, and we saw this during the Cold War, is that international conduct is pretty much focused on two sides, and you have to make a decision. The term third world actually arose from this situation where countries actually didn't want to be part of one camp, and then they basically remained neutral, and the two superpowers tried to extend to this realm of third world countries. Today, the term obviously is used to describe underdeveloped countries. However, the problem is that we are always very close to a full-scale escalation of these tensions, because those two power blocks try to influence other areas of the world and then lead proxy wars, as we have seen during the Cold War. It is always difficult because progress and development in those power blocks, regardless whether it's the central power of the United States on the one side and all the other countries that are related to the Soviet Union or the mainland, Russia as a mainland itself, development is always focused on beating the other and not intrinsically to develop because it's desirable in itself. So that makes such a situation very fragile, as we've already experienced. And then we move to a different kind of order. And this is the unipolar order, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, obviously only one superpower remained, and this is the United States today. In this constellation, all the focus of other countries, whether they are closely aligned with the United States or not, is focused on what the United States are doing actually. Financial markets, economy, social policies, language, education. Even today, I mean, studying at Harvard, I guess, is some sort of prestige that you also earn with that. But this was not always the case, or not to that extent that we have today. American movies, American goods, let's talk about the iPhone, or all sorts of other goods and services, Starbucks, as I said, Hollywood movies or music that comes from the United States. Everything is influenced through this unipolar order, and this is kind of the anchor. In terms of financial markets, the dollar is the reserve currency for a lot of countries, which gives the United States an extremely significant advantage in the realm of economics and financial policy and macroeconomics. This is also a very fragile situation, because such a hegemonic power is able to influence other countries to a much more significant degree, and also disrupt certain social developments there. As I said, export of cultural goods mixes up the culture elsewhere. For example, I can give you a pretty recent or contemporary example by referencing my home country, Turkey, where all those trends that we observe in the United States are kind of moving there and causing social disruptions among young people, but old people as well. They kind of try to act in a way like the North Americans, more specifically Euro-Americans, because the Afro-Americans in the United States of America, they kind of preserved a certain own culture, but this is not it's not that much exported to other countries as the Euro-American culture. So the unipolar structure is very dangerous, because it anchors all the other, or is kind of a focal point for many other countries, and they try to act in a way that does not reflect their cultural core and what they are actually supposed to do and structure their politics, causing inefficiencies, leading them into a decadency, or not even getting to the point where they become that wealthy to become decadent. They become socially decadent, but not economically. So the unipolar structure is also very bad. What am I advocating for? And I wrote an article a couple of years ago, and this is one of my favorite articles, to be honest. You can look it up on esido.com, and I'm also going to put the link down below so you can also read it. It's a very dry read, to be honest. It's very theoretical, and I can understand that this is not a very catchy topic in terms of talking about recent developments and so on and so forth. But theoretically, this article is, as I said, one of my favorites, because it explains the differences between unipolarity, bipolarity, and the third one is which is called multipolarity. And in this state constellation, international state order that I'm talking about, we have different regional power hubs that are not that powerful to kind of become a hegemonic power, but within their cultural realm or the regional extent, they are quite influential. So for example, let's talk about an ideal structure. Would be in North America, obviously the United States of America, and then in Latin America it would be Brazil, or probably Brazil. Then we would have a North African power hub in Libya or Egypt, for example, or Morocco, whichever country is kind of developing into that regional power hub. In the Middle East, it would be Saudi Arabia or Iran. In Central Asia, it would be Turkey. In East Asia, it would be China. In Europe, it would be the UK or Germany. And then in Sub-Saharan Africa, it would be, probably Nigeria or South Africa, something along those lines. But it means that we have power more dispersed on the global state arena, which makes conflict actually not that imminent anymore. And that is because those regional power hubs kind of balance each other out. So with no country actually becoming so strong that they can dominate other great powers, it means that they kind of keep a balance and concentrate on the regional development and kind of anchor those countries along or around that regional power hub. For example, if we think about Turkey again, it would be the situation that this country is among the Central Asian countries, the economically most advanced, and other countries would try to enter, or they would kind of manage trade relations and political relations for that group. Predominantly, obviously, there's international and global trade, certainly, but the focal point would be Turkey in that example. Or for example, when we think about Brazil, the Latin American countries would kind of focus on Brazil, and they would be kind of the first among equals within that region. So that would be the ideal state system and the ideal global order, which is very difficult because we now have a unipolar state structure. And then we come back to the beginning. How can we deal with the United States as the global power hub, basically the global anchor? Obviously, China is trying to challenge the United States of America, but they are not there yet, and I'm reluctant to call this a bipolar international order. There's still some way to go. And the thing with the United States is that, and this is actually a good and a bad thing. It is a capitalist, a strongly capitalist country, meaning they do not have the similar authoritarian tools that other countries, that for example Russia and China have. They don't have it. They cannot simply go to any company or to some lobby groups or other societal groupings and tell them what to do. They're doing it through different venues, behind closed door and so on and so forth, but it's not very direct. In China, you need 2 phone calls and everything is in order like you want it. And they need to act in a way you want them to act. This is not possible in this capitalist system because they are basically relying on the free market system and the free market dynamics. So this is a good thing because in the end, everything is working via the variable of consumption. Supply and demand. It's all supply and demand. Whatever the market does, and I'm not talking about the economic market per se. It can be also social demand and supply that kind of governs how this country is becoming so strong. And this is a good thing because we can kind of steer and control everything we do towards the United States through consumption. As I said, they're exporting cultural goods, don't consume them. They're exporting physical goods, don't consume them. They are exporting weapons, military expertise, they are exporting military agendas, don't consume them. Obviously, this is very difficult because in the end, they have made other countries so dependent on them that once the USA is basically putting sanctions on any country and other countries follow suit, they become in a situation. They reach a situation where they cannot. They are not very flexible economically. Most countries then fall into recession and so on and so forth. But here's the point. If the sanctions of the United States on one country were imposed unilaterally, so just by the United States themselves, that is not much of a game changer. But the ability of the USA to influence Europe and other countries that are kind of closer to the United States from a political standpoint, that makes them strong, because once Europe is also sanctioning you, you're basically done economically. And therefore, the main point is to become economically and socially, culturally independent from the USA. And this is the bad thing, because that is very, very difficult. Because once this convenient pool of cultural goods, physical goods, which are of high quality, obviously, because the market dynamics basically pushed the whole nation towards this efficiency and to this high quality, otherwise they wouldn't be at the top of the list, right? Makes it very, very difficult for countries to find substitution goods elsewhere, except they produce those goods themselves, as China does. But many countries do not have the productive capacity to do so. So it is a very tricky situation to because once you are in this dependent state of consumption of American goods, it is very difficult to get out and produce the productive capacity or kind of establish the productive capacities yourself. Obviously, the United States are not going to just sit there and wait for you to reach autarky and then become independent from all the goods and services that they're providing to the world, as well as capital. This is not what they're going to do. They're going to interfere, they're going to disrupt financial dynamics by reducing capital flows, sanctioning, and so on and so forth. And also they have the reserve currency, which means that it can influence your monetary policy as well. So it makes it very difficult, this capitalist structure. But the only way to go there, like the solution to reducing North American power is very straightforward: reduce consumption, become more independent. But the way to get there from this point onwards is very, very difficult, because they were so good at establishing their position that they currently have. Now you would say, well, isn't it with all the countries that we want to kind of see or want to weaken? No, it's not. For example, India. If you stop consuming Indian goods or Chinese goods, if we want to put China also in this category, or Russia, also three great powers actually, they have the domestic capacities to kind of redirect the demand into the domestic market, especially China with and India with their great populations. It's a huge population, and also they can look elsewhere. And this is not quite the same with the United States. Their population is not that huge, and they need other markets to pay the high prices that they ask for the high qualitative products, which is again not the case in China and India, because they're producing cheaper products. So the United States of America are very, very dependent on international demand, which other countries are not. And as I said, they cannot control directly with very direct and authoritarian orders like other countries can do so. So there is a valid claim for the argumentation to say that consumption is the only vehicle that we can use to weaken the United States of America. In other countries, as I said, this is not so much the case. But as I also said, the road to get there, to weaken them, is very difficult. In order to make things easier, states who really want to weaken the USA not only need they try to build alliances in order to kind of build up the pressure and reduce consumption on a larger scale, but in the first place they need to ban cultural goods, North American cultural goods. Very simple, for example, Starbucks, American movies, music. Yes, it is quite difficult to do that as well from a domestic standpoint, because then it would be seen kind of as repressing the society. But in the end, it is just cultural mercantilism. If you see where I want to get, it's protecting the own society from external influences and strengthen the production of own cultural goods, of own music, literature, movies, TV programs, and so on and so forth. Clothing, another very important aspect. And this might be the soft entry into reducing North American influence and reducing consumption and reliance on what they export to the world. Then you start extending it to trend products such as the iPhone. And you also need to create substitutes for that, obviously. Otherwise, there's a valid claim by Apple as one of the, or producing the best devices in the world, basically. But you need to substitute that in order for those people who are interested in those products to also get this high quality elsewhere. This would be the second step. And then once you did that, it is kind of you already build some sort of independence, and then you also have to start reduce to import the political and industrial influences from the USA. Politically, obviously, it means that you don't follow suit or structure your foreign policy action and also domestic policies along the lines that you think is best for your country and aligned with the cultural core of your country. And then the latest, the United States are going to think, what's going on in this country that is trying to become independent from us. They're going to up the pressure, but at that point you already reached a certain level of independence from them. As well as industrial relations. The USA, not so much as China, but they are also influencing the infrastructure of many countries, especially with their military bases around the world. And those things need to be, the reliance on those contracts and those situations need to be reduced as well. But then we enter a stage where it is very difficult to be undercover with that, and it might lead to political trouble because they are so powerful. But nonetheless, that would be kind of the most feasible way to reduce dependency on the United States of America. And then obviously if we apply that on a larger scale, many states do that, we might reach a situation where many countries become independent from the USA and the power gradually decreases. Obviously, it is a long process. It takes a lot of time, and in the final stage, it would be also the financial market where the dependency is reduced, or maybe not the final stage. Maybe I should add that as well. What can be always done is to redirect investment during the whole process of reducing dependency on the USA towards other financial hubs. For example, Hong Kong, Singapore, Saudi Arabia is emerging as a very important hub. Even Europe. We always tend to put Europe or to equate the USA with Europe, but Europe is a much more reasonable actor within the global state community. So redirecting financial capacities to Europe is also a viable option. And this is a much more undercover route to take, because then you can argue, we're not turning our back on the West, but just on the USA. So there are ways. So I think it is best to think about the financial redirection of capital capabilities or financial capabilities during the whole time, a gradual redirection, but also the step-by-step approach to start with the cultural goods, to reduce the influence of American culture, and then basically, move towards more physical and material things that we do, refrain from importing to our country if we want to weaken the USA. As I said, it is important that this happens on a large scale for it to have an effect on the USA. But nonetheless, that would be kind of the step-by-step approach if we want to know how to deal with the USA. So that's about it. And I hope you liked it. I hope you also follow, like, and share this video. And then see you next time for another episode of the Podcast. So take care and bye.